The frigid depths of the North Atlantic hold countless mysteries, yet one particular enigma has captivated researchers, historians, and the general public for well over a century. We speak of the catastrophic events that unfolded during the night of April 14th to 15th, 1912, when humanity witnessed the loss of what was then considered an engineering marvel beyond compare. At precisely 23 hours and 40 minutes, a magnificent ocean liner embarking on its maiden transatlantic voyage encountered its destiny in the form of a colossal mountain of ice drifting through the pitch-black waters. The official narrative of that fateful night has become common knowledge for anyone with even a passing interest in maritime history. The largest passenger vessel the world had ever seen, the pride and glory of British shipbuilding, sustained catastrophic damage to its hull after colliding with an iceberg and subsequently sank beneath the waves within a matter of hours. More than 1,500 souls perished in the freezing Atlantic waters that night, their lives cut tragically short in what remains one of the deadliest peacetime maritime disasters in recorded history. This catastrophe forever altered the standards of safety at sea and left an indelible mark on human consciousness. However, over the course of the past century, numerous questions have emerged that continue to spark heated debates among historians, researchers, and enthusiasts alike. What if the story we have been told does not represent the complete truth about that tragic night? What if the official version conceals an entirely different narrative? One involving financial manipulation, insurance fraud, and the deliberate substitution of one massive ocean liner for another? These questions might sound like the stuff of fiction, yet evidence recovered from the ocean floor compels us to seriously consider alternative explanations for what truly occurred. Contemporary underwater expeditions to the resting place of the legendary vessel have yielded astonishing discoveries that call into question everything we thought we knew about this disaster. Certain researchers maintain that the ship lying at the bottom of the Atlantic is not the vessel everyone has long believed it to be. According to this theory, the liner that embarked on that ill-fated final voyage was actually a different ship entirely, namely the older sibling known as the Olympic, meticulously disguised to appear as its famous younger brother. Does this sound impossible? Perhaps. But let us together examine the details of this fascinating story and attempt to distinguish fact from fiction. Before delving into conspiracy theories, we must first understand the historical context and circumstances surrounding the construction of these magnificent vessels. The early 20th century was an era of rapid advancement in transatlantic passenger transportation. The largest shipping companies competed fiercely for the right to be called industry leaders, constructing ever larger, faster, and more luxurious liners. This rivalry became known as the oceanic race, and the stakes involved were extraordinarily high. The world of transatlantic travel during this period was characterized by fierce nationalism and corporate ambition. British, German, and American shipping lines vied for supremacy on the lucrative routes connecting Europe to North America. Passengers of means expected not merely transportation, but an experience of unprecedented luxury and comfort. The companies that could deliver the most impressive vessels would dominate this profitable market for years to come. The story of the Olympic-class vessels is inextricably linked to the intense competition in the transatlantic passenger shipping market at the dawn of the 20th century. The British shipping company White Star Line faced a formidable challenge from its primary rival, the Cunard Line. In 1907, Cunard unveiled two revolutionary liners to the world, the Lusitania and the Mauretania. These vessels created an absolute sensation in the maritime industry owing to their remarkable speed and technical specifications. The Lusitania and Mauretania could achieve speeds exceeding 25 knots, making them the fastest passenger ships in existence. They repeatedly captured the prestigious Blue Ribbon of the Atlantic, an award bestowed upon liners that set speed records for crossing the ocean. The leadership of White Star Line understood that decisive action was required to maintain their market position. Matching the competition in terms of speed proved nearly impossible, so a strategic decision was made to emphasize different advantages. PMS. luxury, and passenger comfort above all else. In 1908, the chairman of White Star Line, Joseph Bruce Ismay, met with Lord William James Peary, owner of the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast. At this meeting, a decision was reached to construct three gigantic ocean liners of a new generation that would eclipse all existing vessels in terms of sheer size and level of comfort. Thus was born the concept of the Olympic-class ships, a trio of sister vessels that would represent the pinnacle of Edwardian engineering and design. The first of the three sister ships was the Olympic, whose keel was laid on December 16, 1908. This vessel was assigned construction number 400. 3 months later, on March 31, 1909, construction began on the second ship of the series, which received construction number 401. This particular vessel was destined to enter history under the name Titanic. The third ship of the series, originally named Gigantic but later renamed Britannic following the disaster, was laid down somewhat later. The technical specifications of these vessels astounded contemporaries. The length of each ship measured approximately 269 meters, the beam nearly 29 meters, and the height from keel to the top of the funnels reached 56 meters. Displacement exceeded 46,000 tons. For their time, these were veritable floating cities capable of accommodating more than 2,200 passengers and nearly 900 crew members. Nothing of comparable scale had ever before sailed the oceans. The Olympic was launched on October 20, 1910, and completed her maiden commercial voyage on June 14, 1911. The Titanic was launched on May 31, 1911, and was officially completed on April 2, 1912. Certain differences existed between the vessels. The Titanic was slightly heavier than its elder sibling, featured a somewhat different layout of interior spaces, and differed in certain decorative elements. However, externally the ships were virtually identical, a circumstance that would subsequently give rise to numerous theories about a possible substitution. It bears emphasizing that the construction of each of these giants required colossal financial investment. According to historians' estimates, the cost of building a single Olympic-class liner amounted to approximately £1.5 million sterling, equivalent in modern currency to hundreds of millions of dollars. White Star Line had placed an enormous wager on the success of these vessels, and any problems with them could result in serious financial losses that might threaten the very survival of the company. The construction process itself was a marvel of industrial organization. At its peak, the Harland and Wolff shipyard employed over 15,000 workers dedicated to building these massive vessels. The slipways where the Olympic and Titanic were constructed side by side became tourist attractions, drawing thousands of visitors eager to witness the creation of these engineering wonders. The company spared no expense in promoting its new liners, generating enormous public anticipation for their entry into service. On September 20, 1911, an event occurred that, according to proponents of the conspiracy theory, became the starting point for the entire subsequent scheme. On this day, the Olympic, undertaking her 11th commercial voyage, departed from the port of Southampton. It seemed an ordinary day for a transatlantic liner that had already earned a reputation as a reliable and comfortable vessel. However, fate had other plans in store. As the Olympic was navigating through the Solent, the narrow sea passage between the Isle of Wight and the southern coast of England, an accident occurred that could have spelled the end for the entire Olympic-class program. A British warship, the armored cruiser HMS Hawke, for reasons that remain unclear to this day, altered course and rammed the liner. The impact struck the starboard side of the Olympic, causing significant damage to both vessels. The causes of the collision remain a subject of debate even today. According to one version, the blame lay with the suction effect that occurs when large vessels move through confined waterways. The enormous hull of the Olympic created powerful hydrodynamic forces that could affect nearby ships, essentially drawing smaller vessels toward it. According to another version, human error was responsible, navigational mistakes or violations of maneuvering rules by one or both vessels. The damage to the Olympic proved quite serious indeed. As a result of the impact, the propeller shaft was bent, Two compartments on the starboard side were breached, and a hole was torn in the hull below the waterline. The vessel managed to return to Southampton under her own power, but required extensive repairs. The Olympic was sent back to the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, where she had been built, for the necessary work to be completed. And here begins the most interesting part of the story. When the owners of the Olympic filed an insurance claim for damage compensation, an investigation followed, the results of which proved extremely unfavorable for White Star Line. The naval court found the Olympic, not the cruiser Hawk, to be at fault for the accident. This meant that the insurance company refused to pay compensation for the liner's repairs. Moreover, White Star Line was obligated to reimburse the damage caused to the military vessel. The financial consequences of this ruling were catastrophic for the company. Repairing the Olympic cost an enormous sum that had to be paid from company funds. Additionally, the vessel sat idle without working, generating no revenue during a peak travel season. The repair work took several months, during which specialists at the shipyard restored the damaged structures of the ship. Notably, some parts for the Olympic's repair were taken from the Titanic being constructed nearby, leading to delays in the latter's commissioning. Proponents of the conspiracy theory pay particular attention to this fact. They contend that it was during the repair period at the shipyard that partial exchange of elements between the two vessels occurred. Since the ships were virtually identical, parts from one liner could be installed on the other without any complications whatsoever. This circumstance, according to conspiracy theorists, created ideal conditions for the subsequent substitution of the vessels. But the story of the Olympic did not end there. Shortly after returning to service, in February 1912, the vessel was involved in yet another accident. This time, the liner lost a blade from one of its propellers after striking submerged wreckage. Once again, the Olympic was forced to return to the shipyard for repairs. And once again, this required significant expenditure and time. According to some researchers, these recurring incidents may have convinced company management that the Olympic was bringing nothing but losses and that drastic measures were needed. The pattern of misfortune surrounding the Olympic seemed almost unnatural to some observers. Here was a vessel that had been involved in multiple serious incidents within its first year of service, each time requiring expensive repairs and causing the company to lose valuable revenue. The insurance situation grew increasingly dire, and the financial pressure on White Star Line mounted with each passing month. Let us now examine in detail the ship substitution theory itself, which began forming shortly after the tragedy of 1912, but gained widespread popularity considerably later. According to this version of events, it was not the Titanic, but the damaged and repaired Olympic, carefully disguised as its younger sibling, that departed on that ill-fated maiden voyage. Proponents of the conspiracy theory construct the following chain of logic. After the incident with the cruiser Hawk, White Star Line found itself in an extremely difficult financial position. The Olympic had sustained hidden damage that was not fully repaired during the restoration work. The vessel had become potentially dangerous for operation, but writing it off would mean incurring enormous losses. Insurance payments were impossible since the court had found the Olympic at fault for the collision. In this situation, according to the conspiracy theorists, company leadership conceived a bold plan. What if the ships were switched? The Olympic, renamed as the Titanic, would depart on its supposedly maiden voyage, where a controlled accident would be staged. The damage would be serious enough to warrant an insurance payout, but insufficient to sink the vessel. The real Titanic, newer and more reliable, would continue operating under the name Olympic. Thus, the company would receive insurance money for a damaged ship while keeping a new fully operational vessel in service. To implement such a plan, extensive work would be required to change the identification of the vessels. Theory proponents assert that this was entirely feasible. The ship hulls were practically identical in external appearance. Differences in interiors could be masked with relative ease. The main task would consist of replacing the stern plates bearing the vessel names and modifying certain decorative elements throughout the ship. One of the key pieces of evidence cited by adherents of the substitution theory comprises discoveries made on the ocean floor. During numerous expeditions to the wreck site, hull fragments bearing construction number 400 were discovered. Recall that the construction number of the Titanic was 401, while that of the Olympic was 400. This, according to conspiracy theorists, constitutes direct proof that it is the Olympic lying on the seabed rather than her more famous sister. Additionally, theory proponents draw attention to a number of strange circumstances connected with the final voyage. Certain wealthy and influential passengers canceled their bookings at the last moment and did not embark on the journey. Among them was financier John Pierpont Morgan, who effectively controlled White Star Line through his International Mercantile Marine Company, along with several other prominent businessmen. Was this coincidence or awareness of impending danger? Another argument put forward is the fact that the vessel's insurance sum was substantially increased shortly before the catastrophe. The ship was insured for the sum of £5 million sterling, an enormous amount for that era representing the full value of the vessel. After the liner's sinking, the insurance company Lloyd's of London paid this money to the vessel's owners. Conspiracy theorists pose the question, was this not a pre-planned financial operation designed to rescue the company from its mounting debts? Theory proponents also point to strange behavior by certain crew members during the voyage. In their view, Captain Edward John Smith and other officers may have been aware of the company's plans. This would explain why the vessel was traveling at maximum speed through an area where numerous warnings about the presence of icebergs had been received. Perhaps the plan envisaged a collision with an iceberg that would damage the ship but not sink it. However, something went wrong, and the damage proved far more serious than anticipated, leading to the catastrophic loss of life that ensued. Further suspicious circumstances cited by conspiracy advocates include the inadequate number of lifeboats aboard the vessel. The ship carried boats sufficient for only about one-third of its total passenger and crew capacity. While this was legal under the outdated regulations of the time, some theorists suggest it indicates the planners never expected anyone to actually need the lifeboats, as the controlled collision was supposed to result in a damaged but floating vessel that could be rescued by nearby ships. Naturally, the substitution theory has not escaped criticism. The overwhelming majority of authoritative historians and disaster researchers consider it unfounded and point to numerous contradictions and inconsistencies in the conspiracy theorists' arguments. The first and most compelling argument against the substitution theory relates to the practical impossibility of such an operation. Swapping two enormous ocean liners would have required the participation of hundreds, if not thousands of people, shipyard workers, engineers, company officers, crew members, and others. Keeping such a massive conspiracy secret for over a century seems utterly incredible. History provides no examples of successful concealment of operations on this scale, especially in an era when many participants in events left memoirs, diaries, and other testimony that could potentially expose any wrongdoing. Regarding the hull fragments bearing number 400 found on the ocean floor, critics of the theory offer a simple explanation. As previously mentioned, construction of the Titanic proceeded under conditions of severe time pressure. To accelerate work and compensate for delays caused by the need to repair the Olympic after the collision with the cruiser Hawk, certain parts were temporarily borrowed from the Titanic under construction and installed on the Olympic. In return, spare parts manufactured for the Olympic bearing its construction number were installed on the Titanic. Thus, the presence of parts bearing number 400 on the sunken vessel is entirely explicable without invoking conspiracy theories. Another serious counter-argument comprises passenger testimony and observations. Many people who made the fateful voyage had previously traveled on the Olympic during its months of successful service. Among them were experienced travelers who knew the peculiarities of the elder sibling's interior perfectly well. Had the vessels been switched, someone among these passengers would certainly have noticed discrepancies in layout, decoration, or other details. However, no testimony of such observations has survived in any form. Modern studies of the wreckage also refute the substitution theory with compelling evidence. In 2012, marking the centenary of the catastrophe, Detailed research was conducted on the sunken vessel's hull using the latest underwater exploration equipment. Scientists discovered inscriptions and markings on hull fragments that unambiguously indicate that it is indeed the Titanic, not the Olympic, lying on the seabed. These markings include builder's plates and other identifying features that would have been virtually impossible to falsify. Critics of the theory also draw attention to logical inconsistencies in the very plan of the alleged conspiracy. If the goal was to simulate an accident for insurance purposes, why risk the lives of passengers? It would have been far simpler to arrange an accident during a technical voyage without passengers aboard, perhaps claiming engine trouble or structural issues that required the vessel to be scuttled in shallow waters where it could later be salvaged. Moreover, the deaths of more than 1,500 people led to a massive investigation and intense public scrutiny, which should have significantly increased the risk of the conspiracy being exposed. Historians also note that the financial position of White Star Line did not improve at all following the sinking. On the contrary, the catastrophe dealt a serious blow to the company's reputation and resulted in numerous lawsuits from relatives of the deceased that dragged on for years. If the conspiracy's goal was financial recovery, it clearly failed to achieve its objective and may have made the company's situation even worse than before. As for the canceled bookings by wealthy passengers, including John Pierpont Morgan, critics observed that such cancellations were common practice among business people of that era. Morgan, in particular, canceled his trip due to health reasons, and documentary evidence supports this explanation. His doctor had advised against the voyage, and Morgan was indeed receiving medical treatment during the period when the ship was crossing the Atlantic. Attributing conspiratorial significance to these coincidences means committing the logical error known as apophenia, that is, the tendency to perceive meaningful connections where none exist. Regardless of which version of events one chooses to believe, the sinking of the legendary liner in April 1912 became a watershed moment in the history of maritime transport. This tragedy forced humanity to reconsider many aspects of safety at sea and led to the adoption of crucial international agreements that continue to protect seafarers and passengers to this day. One of the principal consequences of the catastrophe was the creation of the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, known by the acronym SOLAS. The first version of this document was adopted in 1914, just 2 years after the famous vessel's sinking. The convention established minimum safety standards for passenger vessels, including requirements for the number of lifeboats, radio equipment, hull construction, and crew training. Since then, SOLAS has been revised and supplemented numerous times, but its fundamental principles remain enforced to this day and govern maritime safety worldwide. Another important result was the establishment of the International Ice Patrol, an organization that monitors iceberg movement in the North Atlantic and warns vessels of danger. The Ice Patrol has been operating since 1914 and throughout its existence has prevented numerous potential catastrophes by providing accurate and timely information about ice conditions. Ships crossing the Atlantic Ocean receive regular reports on the locations of icebergs and can alter their routes in advance to avoid dangerous areas. The catastrophe also led to stricter requirements for radio communications on vessels. On that fateful night, the radio station of the nearest ship, the Californian, was switched off and the operator did not hear the distress signals being broadcast. Following this tragedy, a requirement was introduced for round-the-clock operation of radio stations on all passenger vessels. Additionally, the SOS distress signal was standardized, and its use became mandatory for all maritime vessels, ensuring that calls for help would be universally understood and acted upon. It is interesting to note that the third ship of the series, the Titanic, never became a passenger liner as originally intended. When the First World War began, the vessel was requisitioned by the British government and converted into a hospital ship to serve the wounded. In November 1916, the Titanic struck a mine in the Aegean Sea and sank, taking 30 lives with her. Thus, of the 3 sister ships, only the Olympic escaped a tragic fate and served until 1935, when she was finally broken up for scrap. The fate of the Olympic after her siblings' sinking was relatively fortunate. The vessel continued making transatlantic voyages for several years before the outbreak of war. During the First World War, she served as a troop transport, carrying soldiers and supplies across the dangerous Atlantic waters. In May 1918, the Olympic rammed and sank a German submarine, becoming the only merchant vessel to destroy an enemy submarine during the war, earning her the nickname Old Reliable. After the war, the ship returned to passenger service and operated until the mid-30s, when technological progress rendered her obsolete. The legacy of these great ships extends far beyond their individual fates. They represented the pinnacle of Edwardian engineering and embodied humanity's confidence in technological progress. Their story reminds us that even our greatest achievements remain subject to forces beyond our control, whether those forces be icebergs, mines, or simply the passage of time. In summarizing our investigation, we must acknowledge that the ship substitution theory, despite its appeal to conspiracy enthusiasts, lacks sufficient evidence to be considered credible. The absolute majority of authoritative historians and researchers reject it as unfounded. The discoveries on the ocean floor cited as proof have entirely rational explanations that do not require invoking conspiracy theories or elaborate schemes. At the same time, we cannot deny that this version of events possesses a certain allure that continues to captivate public imagination. The human mind is inclined to seek hidden causes where none may exist. We find it difficult to accept that the greatest tragedies occur due to a confluence of circumstances, human errors, and unfortunate coincidences. It is far easier to believe in the existence of a conspiracy in which someone bears personal responsibility for what happened, providing a clear villain and a satisfying narrative structure. The story of the legendary ocean liner's sinking continues to capture human imagination more than a century after the tragedy. Each year brings new books, documentary films, and research devoted to this catastrophe. For some, it is a story of human hubris and overconfidence in technology. For others, it is a tale of heroism and self-sacrifice in the face of disaster. For still others, it remains a detective mystery whose answer has yet to be found, a puzzle that continues to fascinate and perplex. Perhaps we shall never know the complete truth about what occurred that fateful April night. The cold waters of the North Atlantic reliably guard their secrets at a depth of nearly 4,000 meters, where sunlight never penetrates and the pressure would crush any unprotected human explorer. The wreckage of the legendary ship is gradually disintegrating due to bacterial action in ocean currents, and within several decades, nothing may remain of it except memories and debates among those who continue to study this enduring mystery. However, whatever the truth may be, the sinking of this vessel forever changed the world in profound and lasting ways. It forced humanity to recognize the fragility of technological progress and the necessity of respecting the forces of nature. It demonstrated that even the most grandiose creations of human hands can be destroyed within mere hours when confronted with the raw power of the natural world. And it reminded us of the value of every human life and the importance of preparedness for disaster. The disaster also transformed popular culture in ways that continue to resonate today. The story has been retold countless times in literature, theater, and film, becoming one of the most enduring narratives of the modern age. Each generation discovers this tale anew and finds fresh meaning in its themes of ambition, tragedy, and survival. The ship has become a symbol, representing both the heights of human achievement and the depths of human vulnerability. Dear friends, we have traveled a long path together, exploring this remarkable story from multiple angles. Now you know the main facts, versions, and arguments connected with one of the most famous maritime catastrophes in history. What position do you hold? Do you believe in the substitution theory, or do you consider it unfounded? Perhaps you have your own thoughts and observations that you would like to share with others who are equally fascinated by this mystery. Leave your comments below this video and let us together continue this captivating investigation. History has not yet spoken its final word, and who knows what discoveries await us in the future as technology continues to advance and new evidence emerges from the depths.